Welcome back to Birds of a Feather for our fifth block with, and as I speak, I'm getting interrupted by a phone call. Apparently, we are not flocking yet. Now we're flocking. I have silenced my phone. Here we go. Let's flock, boys and girls. Sorry about that. Anyway, for fifth flock with Alan Bondar, the Unraveler, aka the Unraveler, here as your host, my co-host Dustin, aka the Pursuer, where we together pursue and unravel things, stuff. That's what we do. And today we are joined with Derek Lambert from Myth Vision. Woo woo!
Thank you.
Mark Chiachira, also an awesome entity here with us today. So I want to start right now by saying this. These two guests are so exciting. So Derek is the founder, so to speak, or the creator of Myth Vision. But in a very real sense, Mark is kind of the father of Myth Vision.
Yep.
And I'm going to let Derek explain this. Mark, I would let you explain it, but I don't think you're going to give yourself the praise that I think Derek's going to give you. And I think it's important that we all understand what's going on here because you, in all reality, are the hero of this night. Derek.
Yeah, definitely shout out to Mark. Mark, can I be completely transparent here, brother?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I made a vow to Mark a long time ago. First of all, I want to say this. Mark was an atheist, okay? And I had my spidey senses tell me back when I was Mr. Christian Derek, and he reached out to me, and he knew the preterist community quite well, was part of them. He worked for Kent Hovind. I mean, he was in some very powerful evangelical groups, okay? And
let me correct that. It's Ken.
Is
Ham.
it not Ken Ham? Sorry.
The Answers in Genesis Ministry.
Been years. I was thinking of the Noah's Ark. So, and your art, of course, very artistic, all of that. That was always something that you reached out to me one day and you said, "Hey man, I got some cool stuff I've learned. I'd love to share with you." And I'm like, "Man, this guy's really cool. I love learning weird, cool, interesting things. Let's talk." And he started talking like about Samson and Hercules. I'm like, why is he bringing up Hercules? Like, I get Samson, but what the hell is this other guy got to do in any of this? 100% teddy bear. Love. He led with love. He led with patience. He led with like friendliness. It was more important. I could tell that this wasn't a facade. He didn't put on the outfit of, all right, I'm an atheist and I gotta pretend to be nice. He was just who he is. And I had like a feeling in some of the things he said, like, this is totally heretical. Like, bro, are you a believer in God? Like, I need to know this. And I said, but not that I'm going to have any like weird suspicions or like my walls aren't going to go up. Yes, in my mind, they were going to go up. But it still didn't stop me from listening to Mark. And Mark's like, look, yes, I don't believe there's a God at the time. I don't know where he is today, Mark. That's your own personal, whatever you choose to say at the time. Okay. But at the time it was like, you were very skeptical and I was like, oh, should I be hanging up or not? And he's like, but I don't care what you believe. I'm not here to like make you believe like me. I just want to have fun and teach you some cool things that I found out. He like totally made me feel comfortable, even though I was like in the back of my mind, yeah, be cautious, be careful. But when he made arguments, when he presented some of this information, it was not led with mockery. It wasn't led with like, let me poo-poo the God that you believe in. It was much more like, look at the text, look at the story, look at this myth, and then look at this other one. And you'll notice how similar these tropes are because behind them all, underneath all of them is really a story of the cosmos. A story of the sun, moon, and stars, and the constant cyclical nature of humans looking up for answers to heaven. And so these stories are painted across all cultures, symbolizing the narrative of heaven on earth, as above, so below, on earth as it is in heaven. And dude, I was like, whoa, I've never even thought anything like this. So he hit me with Shamash and Samson, Shimshon, being sun, the little sun, which is a sun god, Shamash. And I thought, what's going on? Like the whole biblical interpretation I once had unraveled. We became very, very close friends. And I needed to do more of these kinds of videos and like bring more information to the world from a mythical perspective. So Mark is the father, and I'm like, dude, I wanted to go tell everyone, Mark, you got to hear what this guy Mark says. And Mark's like, Mom, no, she'll die from knowing this. So I kept my vow, bro. Enough.
Yeah.
The night it got released, like I feel so special right now. Dustin, you and I, we are this is the moment
This
in
is it.
history where Myth Vision reveals the father. Like I feel like I'm like the Godfather, you know? Like, this is
I don't want to be the father.
like, you're the Godfather, bro. I mean, we all bow down to you, man. You are the reason Myth Vision exists.
True.
Thank goodness for you, broski. Thank goodness for you.
You know, it's like you guys were all within the preterist community, as we all were, you know, and we all know what it was like when we crossed that threshold, right? We all took the smash mouth, right? I mean, we were beat up by church elders and I mean heretic flying words like crazy.
Not only that, Dustin beat me up in the covenant creation room. I'm not making this up. Dustin came for my throat. At one point, Dustin was like, yo, bro, get out of here with that heresy and give this group over to people who are part of. And we had a real over astrotheology, Mark. We had a
Okay.
Yes.
Man.
Well, this is that red line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That even goes beyond preterism that you cannot cross.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
This is the real deal.
That, so that's okay. So let me set up this show then, because I want to draw a distinction between this show is called Views of the Bible, and that they're no different than our independent views or how people view us. And we intentionally chose silly pictures because that's essentially what it comes down to. But I want to draw a distinction between views of the Bible and interpretations of the Bible. We're not necessarily talking about interpretations of the Bible tonight. So when I speak interpretations, I mean people interpret the Bible as dispensationalists. You know, that's a certain interpretation of the Bible. Or you might look at covenant theology. That's one interpretation of the Bible. Or Reformed theology, which is somewhat similar to covenant theology, but not identical. There are some differences. And then you have you get into preterism, or partial preterism. That's one option. And then you go to full preterism. That's also an option. And then you have covenant eschatology, which shares similarity with all of those, but not identical. Also not the same as covenant theology. And then you got, Israel only preterism. And it just goes on and on and on. You have all these different interpretations of the Bible. That's not what this show is about. Because we could also demonstrate the silliness of all the interpretations of the Bible and how it's ridiculous that a God can't communicate clearly enough to his people to allow us to interpret it just the way he wants us to. Instead, we have thousands of interpretations of the Bible. Tonight, we're talking about views of the Bible. What made the Bible happen? Where did it come from? What are the thoughts that make this Bible the reality that it became? Like, where did it come from? Who thought it up? Is there some astrological ideas behind it, as Mark was just suggesting and Derek hinted at? That's where we're going tonight. And so I am super excited about this show because it's also going to show a lot of problems with the Bible in itself, because we're going to show that there are a lot of different views of the Bible as well. So what I want to do, I want to start with Mark, because Mark, you're really the first person that became a part of this particular night. Like, your astrological views are unbelievable. They're so awesome. So I want you to start, and then we're all just going to piggyback off that and then jump to different views or share our thoughts on your view or whatever, whatever your thoughts are, because it just goes to show that there's something very cool going on here behind the scenes that maybe a lot of people haven't seen. Does that sound good with everybody to let Mark start?
I'm fine.
Let's do it. Mark.
Yeah. And if I'm talking too much, just butt right in, and because I could go on forever on this stuff. It's so cool. It's
And
so
feel free.
it's so interesting to me. It's more of a hobby now. I don't spend nearly as much time as I used to in this because now I'm a mystery performer, and my shows are sold out now almost a year in advance. And so I just love entertaining people and using actually these things in my show to help educate people. And it's been pretty exciting actually. And I want to spend the rest of my time, the 10-15 years that I have left, doing what I love to do instead of trying to figure out what this mystery is. You know what I mean? Mystery is good. Mystery, I think, is what drives humanity forward. I think, you know, a myth vision is all about unraveling the mysteries of what's going on here. What's the Bible about? You know what I mean? And so it's what drives us forward. It's what makes us learn and grow. Well, when I was a teenager, I was influenced very heavily by Star Wars. The movie had just come out, and I remember paying over 40 times to see it. I was that enthralled with it. You know, my brother and I would take like even a tape recorder and hide it in our jacket, our winter jacket, into the theater, and we would secretly record the audio, and then we would play the lines back before we went to bed at night and rehearse the lines, you know. And we'd never seen anything like that. And so it was my dream to work for George Lucas in Industrial Light and Magic. And my parents could not afford to send me to UC Film School. So my father was transferred. He worked for AT&T at the time, and he got transferred to Florida. And so we moved down there, and I started flipping hamburgers at Pinocchio Village House in the Magic Kingdom. And because I said, oh, well, Disney's the next best thing, I guess, you know. Well, I finished up my art degree down in Orlando. And one day, one of my managers came to me and said, we want you to create a poster for our summer tickets party. And so I did that. They loved it, to the point where she came back, I think it was like 3 p.m. or something, and said, Mark, tomorrow at 4, you have an interview if you want to be an artist for Disney. So I'm like, hell yeah, you know, because somebody has to die before you get an art position at Disney. Okay. So I became the senior illustrator for the president of the Magic Kingdom.
Death and resurrection, baby. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I know, right? The Cinderella story, right?
Dude, it's also how odd it is that Star Wars is a part of Disney now.
Exactly.
That's crazy, man.
And the cool thing is my dream actually came true through the back door, and I never realized it. And that was like I helped design certain elements of the Star Tours attraction, which is George Lucas's project. The same with the Indiana Jones Stunt Theater. And I ended up working with George Lucas for about a week on that project. And I went and picked him up at Orlando International, him and his girlfriend. They were staying at the Grand Floridian. I took them there. His girlfriend turned out to be Linda Ronstadt, if you know who that is, at the time. And it took me like 3 days to get up enough nerve to ask him if that was really Linda Ronstadt. And he said, yeah. He said, we're just using her real Mexican name so that we can avoid the paparazzi and all that type of jazz. And so in my career, I've worked with some of the most creative people ever. And I mean, I worked with Jim Henson in the Muppets before he passed away. I helped design some elements of the Muppet Vision 3D, which I guess is now going away. But anyway, I was really inspired by Star Wars. And so I really looked into where this story came from, who inspired George Lucas, right? And it was the works of Joseph Campbell, who's the author of A Hero of a Thousand Faces, or what's known as The Hero's Journey. And if you don't know who Joseph Campbell is, he was a comparative religionist, and he would go to all the different religions of the world and find the commonalities and what made them all have those similarities. And so if you don't know what The Hero's Journey is, it's Hollywood's best kept secret. They actually don't like you to know about it, because the major blockbuster films like The Wizard of Oz or Star Wars or The Matrix or any of these are built around that model. And so I went and I read Joseph Campbell's works, and I started to see things. You know, when I grew up, I was interested in the Iliad and the Odyssey and Jason and the Argonauts and King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table and all these really cool stories, you know, Homer, and these were some required readings in high school. I mean, if you say Homer to somebody today, so one of these kids from our generation, he's thinking of The Simpsons dad, you know? I mean, on the TV show, he wouldn't know what I'm talking about. But I started coming across material. Being a preterist, I really wanted to understand not only preterism better, but how that changed the entire Bible, you know, and its perspective. And so I know I needed to immerse myself in that first century thinking in order to really understand their metaphors and their, you know, their way of thinking. So anyway, I came across it was a quote actually from David Chilton's book, The Days of Vengeance, where I think David began to see these things. Had he lived long enough, I think he would have seen them. But he talked about, what was it, the four beasts or the four creatures in Revelation, and how they were the four cardinal points of the zodiac. And I never knew what to do with that material because, you know, zodiac, that's forbidden stuff. That's like astrology, and right. And I said, you know, truth has nothing to fear from an open and honest investigation. And so I started to dig into that material. And I found that the biblical stories, I think, I think they're very Hellenized material and heavily influenced by the Babylonians and astrology. And I began to see certain things, the stories themselves, mimicking the stories in the constellations of the night sky. And I have my own theories on certain things, and don't take anything that I say as gospel. Go out and research this stuff yourself. But I really think that the Genesis creation account is really the beginning of astrology and the beginning of understanding the wheel within the wheel, so to speak. You've got Eve, who is the virgin Virgo. You've got the two twins, Cain and Abel. Adam, I think, is a representation possibly of the sun in Virgo. And he names the animals, right? Adam names the animals. Well, are those the animals on the earth, or are they the animals in the sky? Because they're the fowl of the air, they're the creeping things, like the crab or the scorpion. The the fowl could be Aquila, the eagle, which was always associated with Scorpio because it's right near Scorpio. And you also see throughout the Bible, it's God who names the people, like Abram becomes Abraham, right? And I think what's going on here is and these are my own theories, is that in each of the stories, you have the main character, which is the son, and then the sub character is the house in which the son resides. And when I say house, there are 12 different houses of the zodiac. And so the sun resides in each of those 12 uh, uh, things. So, anyway, I'll give you a for instance, or a few of them to help make it make sense. Like, I think the Noah story is what we today would understand in Greek terms as Aquarius the waterman. Noah is the Hebrew waterman in that story. It also comes from the Gilgamesh story, the Epic of Gilgamesh. And I always get this name, his name confused. It's Unapishtim. I had to spell it out so I get it right. But he saves his family in a boat, just like Noah saves his. And then you've got the dove and the raven of the story that also matches the biblical account. And I believe that the boat in both of those stories is the constellation, the Argo Navis. It's a big boat constellation in the night sky. It's where Jason and the Argonauts come from. The boat that Jason rides in that story is the Argo. Then we have Jacob and Esau, the twins, right? So I think this is the Gemini, the twins story, where their father is the son, Isaac. I think that you go from there, the whole Abraham story, and the ram, I think, is the Aries the ram story. What we would know as that. These are Hebrew legends or Hebrew hero stories, just like we have today. We have our heroes like Superman and Spider-Man and that kind of thing. But the Hebrews had the same kinds of things. As did every culture. They had their heroes, whether it would be Zeus or Hercules or any of the main gods, throughout history. And there's a book I came across that I encourage everyone to get, and I'm going to plug Derek Smith Vision here too. It's called Synopsis of Epic, Tragedy, and the Gospels by Dennis R. MacDonald. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Derek, but I think, didn't you do kind of like a masterclass series on that material? Because I think that alone would be worth the price of the ticket to go through that. And when you go through that or read that book, I think if you're honest with yourself, you're going to understand that these stories definitely have a connection, to the ancient world. They're not just original to the Hebrews. It's it's mind blowing. It's you know you got the golden calf, which I think is the Taurus the bull story. I think you've got Jonah in the fish, which I think is the Pisces the fish story. You got Moses coming down from the mountain with the law, which is, I think, the Libra scales of justice. You've got, the whole Samson thing is, I think, part of the winter solstice.
I think that example, Mark, if you don't mind me chiming
Yeah.
in, I don't want to.
No.
I think that is what sticks out the most in our memory of all of our discussions, because we've probably spoken, 100 hours on the phone. I mean, you and me hung out
Yeah.
for a very long time talking about stuff. What stuck out to me the most, I think, and the best giveaway, there's a few things that for those who might be viewing going, how do I know the scales of Libra or the Pisces or this or that? Or even with Elijah and Elisha, when Elisha ends up calling God to kill those 42 kids, you have two bears, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, which are represented as constellations in the sky, who kill the 42 children. Now, anyone who knows a little bit about numerology, 42 is a sacred number. So like there's so much baggage you kind of have to like build up to getting this, but it's calendar, it's seasonal. It's, look at how long was Enoch alive before God took him? 365 years in Genesis. That's a solar years calendar, right? So he is the sun, or symbolic in some way to deal with the sun. Well, what really sells me on astrotheology being there somehow, shape, or form is, and I mean, it might be like Dennis MacDonald's hypothesis. Certain examples of him imitating in the New Testament the Greek epics are stronger than other examples. But once you see some of it, you wonder what else is there. And that is Samson's name in Hebrew, Shimshon, means little sun. So picture an anthropomorphized story of the sun, a human narrative, but it's really the characters are also what's going on in heaven. So yeah, you have Philistines, you have geography, you have real earthly descriptions to give you the human story within this culture, but it's really reflecting the heavens and what's going on. Sun, 7 locks of hair, 7 days a week. When his hair is cut, when his sun is not shining, the rays of the sun, these 7 locks, he loses his strength. But who ends up defeating him and taking his strength? Delilah, who represents the moon. And she's paid in silver, the color of the moon. So what you start to realize is maybe this is actually telling us a story in a story. And in that story, you're getting the celestial activities, but also the earthly activities on earth as it is in heaven. And you remember when Samson gets captured and finally after the third try, here you have this constant 3-day motif, by the way, that echoes from Inanna's descent in ancient Mesopotamia to Jonah being swallowed for 3 days, to Jesus being in the tomb for 3 days. The list goes on and on. His eyes are gouged out. No more sight. And he's in like a basement or a dungeon grinding mill, almost like a winter, like the sun has gone down. He's lost his power. It's the winter solstice. The sun is no longer having its strength. And he's grinding mill, which is the reserved food for those who are surviving during winter. Well, during a festivity of Dagon's temple, they bring out the sun. And one last time, the sun rises again. And when he does, his strength is back and he destroys the temple. So there is this like story within a story in many of these motifs that are reflective of the celestial. And that's what captivated me. And I went, it'd be funny. We could all guess these interpretations. And yes, it is subjective. But his name means sun. And he has 7 locks. I mean, kind of hard to not think there's something going on there. And that's what led me down this path of going, okay, hold on, what else is there? What else are we missing? And the list goes on these examples that Babylonians, by the way, ancient Babylon, were the first Star Watchers, they were the first people who literally became the astronomers of the world. They brought the science of all of this and popularized it. Now, there were people before that were observing this stuff, but I'm saying they popularized astronomy on a level. And look, all the Bible's indebted to ancient Mesopotamian, Canaanite, Ugarit, the whole nine. So there's something to this. There's definitely something to this.
Let me give you some more example. Go ahead, Alan. Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to ask, like, real quick, because everything you guys are saying makes sense. So, all of what you're saying is the undergirding, theoretically, of how the Bible came about.
I mean, in a nutshell, nothing. There's not a single myth, and this is something that you can read from famous mythologists that have written "Hero with a Thousand Faces." There's not a single myth that is in isolation. They always are recycling earlier tradition. So the Bible, the reason it was so successful is that it is tapping into every single fabric of sociology, psychology, and the ancient stories that humans have had for millennia. So I know a lot of skeptics who like to poo-poo the Bible. You'll catch me criticized. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of no good things that we could find. But I cherish it. I actually love these stories because that's what they are. They're not literal. They're not actual things that literally happen. There might be some things that are reflected in there that might try to be historical to some degree, but they're really, when you go to try and fact check them, they didn't happen that way.
So the original intention behind it was to write a mythology. It wasn't supposed to become
a story.
It was just supposed to be a story, right? It wasn't, but it became something more than it was intended to be.
I think it was designed that way in order to, you remember stories better than anything.
Yeah, I mean, you look, mundane facts. Yeah,
people don't. I mean, when you attended history class, right? And it was all the names and dates and stuff. Do you remember any of that stuff today? It's like
President so and so went down to the
But if someone told you the story, the real life story of George Washington, let's say, you'll remember his life. You'll remember what he did. Because the one thing that I have learned is that humans are story-consuming machines. Okay? Whole industries, novels, you look at the Harry Potter stuff or Hollywood, right? Is a whole industry built on stories. You and I pay good money for a ticket to go watch a good story. Okay? And one thing I've really learned, and this is something I wish everyone would take away from just this one thing, is there's something called religious syncretism. And it's a fact. It's a reality. It's seen by scientists. It's seen by mythologists, poets, you name it. Okay, and that is that, like Alan said, these things that undergirded the Bible and these mythologies were the heavens, were the stars. They were the stories of the day. And they used these stories in culture to try to bring people together. Like, I'm going to bring up, like, what is it? Osiris, It's like he's bull, he's the Apis bull, and he's Osiris. And they combine the two. You can actually find statues of the two where it's like a bull face on one side and a man's face on the other side, which is their god combined. But they're trying to use that religious syncretism to say, bring the Greeks and the Egyptians together under Ptolemy the First. Okay. And we do that today even. We create new stories. We take the parts that we like. We'll create a new story today so that it's relevant for us. And then we're entertained by it. I'm going to give you an example, like The Matrix. Have you guys seen that movie?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Well, Neo is the Christ figure. Okay, he's the one who raises from the dead at the end of the film. Morpheus is the John the Baptist character who prepares the way of Neo, right? You have Trinity, the love interest. Interesting that that's a biblical term. Well, it's not technically a term in the Bible, but you know what I mean. It's taught as a thing. Cypher is the Judas character who betrays Neo, right? So we've taken elements of an older story, like the gospel story, the ones that we like, and we've created a new story. Oh, his ship was called the Nebuchadnezzar, I think, also. So you can tell these are all biblical themed parts and pieces, but we took those things and we created a new story that's relevant to us in our day, in our culture. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
They did the same exact things.
And you could even add that in the Matrix, to use this modern example so our viewers really can capture this, there's a lot more philosophical Gnosticism in this. So
Yes.
the not winner Christianity version, they did not win out, but we have their voices echoed in the heresiologists and those like documents like Nag Hammadi and stuff. Neoplatonists saw the flesh as totally wicked, evil. There's an alternative reality, if you will, and this is not the real reality, which Plato kind of started this. Well, what is the Matrix? And when you start realizing that once you swallow that pill, John the Baptist tells the Christ, if you will, you're going to know the truth. So get ready. And he goes and he dunks into the river, so to speak, swallowing the pill. And sure enough, he wakes up on the other side and he realizes, oh, snap, what is reality here? So they're merging Gnostic thought, and I imagine much other philosophical schools, especially into the Matrix, but they are syncretizing, getting Mark's point, like the Apis bull and Osiris, and they're merging them. And I think that Jesus in the New Testament, while heavily indebted to Jewish scripture, clearly it is written over and over. They're doing a lot with Jewish scripture. Is, as Mark pointed out earlier, we have a course about this with Dennis R. McDonald. It's called Reading the Gospels or Reading the New Testament with One Eye on Greek Poetry. And it shows you that the authors are taking the popular narratives in Greek. The New Testament is written in Greek. If you don't realize the significance of using Greek to a broad Gentile Greek audience, Greek-speaking, Greek-reading audience, you're missing like the factor of marketing. Anyone who markets, Dustin's a professional at this. Okay. Marketing is like aware, like he's got a whole team. I've seen the screenshots and I'm like, okay, he knows what it takes to market. Well, imagine Dustin saying, hey, we're in Texas. Let's just pretend we're in Texas and we're going to market to Texans. But I'm only going to use stuff that they talk about in India. Your Texans aren't going to buy what you're selling. Okay. You're going to give them what they already have, but you give your spin. And so the New Testament is marketing to those already existing awareness stories, but giving it a whole new twist, so to speak.
That makes
the Gospels
like a ton of sense as to how the New Testament came about and why they capitalized on mined the Old Testament to bring about the new. Like that's very insightful. I like that.
It's so much more than that. I'm wrapping up Oh, go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
It's true. I think you have, Philo's thoughts in the New Testament from directly his writings. I think you have Plato involved. I think, of course, Homer. They took all these different materials and they created these stories because they're so familiar. I mean, everybody in the first century is aware of Homer. Everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a big deal. They know who Hercules is. they know these heroes, these characters, and they're loved. I mean, Dionysus, very popular god in the Mediterranean because he's the wine god, right? we all we all like that. Uh, but Dionysus was turning water into wine 500 years before Jesus was, or the Jesus character.
Even better miracles with wine. There's
Yeah, it's
so much.
So it's a very popular theme, and that's preserved even over into the New Testament because it is so popular. And these things, the whole Bible, like Derek's saying, is impregnated with meaning. I think that this book was their math in gematria. I think it was their poetry, their music, their hero stories, agricultural information based on the zodiac. It's so much more. It's like their book of life, their book of wisdom, their book of knowledge that they have gained over the years, their wisdom sayings that are valued because they create a system or a society that has order and has rules. It kind of takes out the chaos out of the mix and creates civilization where we're civilized. I love that. I want to give you a little bit more, like, let's say on the Aquarius story, okay, like Noah being the waterman and the Argo Navis constellation being the boat. Well, you'll remember the dove that's in the story. It's also in the night sky as what we call Columba the dove. And then we have the raven in the story, which we today call as Corvus the crow. And the Milky Way River was always seen as the heavenly waters, and I can just imagine. Have you ever seen the Milky Way and it looks like a river in the night sky? I mean, I know it's hard today because we can't really look at the night sky because of light pollution and the way it kind of floods the sky. But if you go someplace like Australia or somewhere where it's really clear, there isn't a whole lot of light, you'll actually see the Milky Way and it looks like a river in the night sky. Well, imagine that river coming up over the mountains in the ancient world and it being the waters that cover the earth to the highest mountains. They see the waterman and his boat, and they talk about the dove and the raven. And in the New Testament, these characters are creating a new story. They're using the Old Testament stories, which I think are a multiplicity of sun stories, and they're creating a new story based on Jesus, who I believe to be the Son. And Mary now takes the place of Eve. She's the Virgo. She's the virgin. Okay. Who's the waterman in the New Testament? John the Baptist, right? Baptizing people in the water, saving all these people. The dove in the story, right? You had it in the Old Testament. You've got it in the New Testament when the dove comes down and descends upon Jesus at his baptism. It's Columba the dove, okay? What we know as that. But James and John, the sons of thunder, right? As Dennis MacDonald would say, these are the Gemini twins. They speak as one person. And it's really interesting to me. They ask the question, remember James and John, and they say, Lord, who will sit at your right hand and who will sit at your left? Well, you'll see these petroglyphs in Greece and in Rome of gods like Jupiter or Zeus, and they're flanked by two guys. They're Celtes and Celtopotes, or Castor and Pollux, and they are the Gemini twins. And they flank the god on the right and on the left in many of these gods. And you have this same question being asked of Jesus by James and John. And you have to ask yourself, is this a literary tool? You know, is this some type of foreshadowing, a mechanic to describe the two thieves on the cross, who sits on his right and who sits on his left? You see what I'm saying? So as they read these things, they go, oh, yeah, it must be the two thieves that sat on the right and the left side of Jesus hanging upon the cross. You know, they use these tools. These people are brilliant, by the way.
Mhm.
I mean, they have so much, you know, they have their Einsteins, their Newtons, their mathematicians that are really strong individuals, and they're applying all this knowledge to these stories. And they're using the Old Testament, they're using Philo, they're using Homer in order to compile this new sun story where Jesus is the sun. I think, you know, his crown of thorns, when you look at the sun, what is it? It's a crown of thorns, the corona of the sun. He walks on the water as a reflection, right? He turns the water of the grapes into wine at the wedding feast of Cana, just like the sun turns them to wine. He is the consuming fire, as Paul describes him. He's the bright and morning star. He is the light of the world. He rides and comes on the clouds of heaven, right? Just like Apollo did, just like Helios did in their quadrigas, coming across the sky. The solar boat of Khufu, you know, in Egypt. You've got all of these things that it's not coincidence. You know what I'm saying? It's like I look at things where you say to yourself, okay, how many dots on a graph does it take to draw a straight line? And then if I get other dots on that line, then it becomes a trend, right? And the more dots that end up being on this line, you begin to say, okay, this isn't coincidence anymore. These are data points that are real, and there's something deeper going on here, you know. So yeah.
Yeah. So much good material. So you've presented a very strong argument for the astrological perspective on how the Bible was written, also borrowing from previous mythologies. My question to you, to Derek and Dustin, do you guys have alternative perspectives on either Mark's theory here that seems to be presented with good evidence and demonstration, or a completely different view of how the Bible came about? Why don't you guys chime in? Dustin, do you have anything to say? You've been pretty quiet.
I don't think it's either or, and I don't think Mark would say that either. I don't think there's one unified intent. I think it's stories. It's a hodgepodge of stories, and to be honest with you, for me, this is what undid everything for me, was when I began to see this, and preterism, thankfully, put me on the right road to get out of all of this mess. Well, out of the theological constructs, the confines of Christian thinking. It saved me because the very first one I saw was the story of Pythagoras being used in the New Testament when Jesus comes and, well, a man comes to a foreign land and tells them to go out and throw their nets over the boat and tells them the number of the fish. And everybody goes, "Oh, I love that biblical story." And I'm like, that's not a biblical story. That's a story of Pythagoras, which was hundreds of years before Jesus. And I remember seeing that, and I, like Mark said, I could not blow that off. I mean, other people just blow that off. Oh, well, they're using it for a theological. And I was like, no, there's something a little more to this. And then I did start stumbling on the astrotheological view from a few different people. And then I started stringing together things like 12 constellations, 12 tribes, 12 apostles. I mean, it becomes so overwhelming that you really just can't ignore it. I got Dennis McDonald's book when Derek first interviewed him, and he and Derek was endorsing his book. That is not a book you can just read. It is not. If you think that, you're going to be in for a big mistake. That's a book you have to reference and study and look at comparatively, because it is probably, in my opinion, the most overwhelmingly convincing work that shows irrefutably that the authors of these stories, whoever they may have been, were copying pre-existing mythology. There's just no way around it, in my opinion. That being said, man, guys, this is like opening a freaking fire hydrant and trying to tell somebody to get a little bit of water in a cup. And drink. It really is. And you guys have alluded to that, because y'all like, there's so much more. And there is. And the more I've studied all this stuff, I call it the upside down funnel. It never funnels down. It is constantly doing this. And the more you study, the more you go, there's no end to this. I have a suspicion that is not provable. I don't think much of any of this is provable, really, at least definitively. I think it's all hypothesis and theory. I have a suspicion that whoever wrote the New Testament, because I don't think it was the people we've attributed it to. I don't think that the Bible was put together when conservative Christian academics would like us to think they were. I think these were Greeks, very familiar with all of this. I think Constantine saw what he had in Christians being submissive to governments and authorities, and I think he weaponized it, and that is where the Christianity that became what we know today had its embryonic start, was under Constantine. I think if Constantine had not got involved, I think Christianity would have fizzled. That's what I personally think. I think what that movement that was starting would have probably just fizzled out, and there would have been some.
Yeah, we would have been worshipers of Mithras, is what we would have been.
Yes, Mark. Yes, I completely agree with you. And people don't understand that. And so when we start talking about all this stuff, man, my brain almost starts short circuiting, because there's just so much. And then you listen to people like Elaine Pagels, who Derek has had on, Bart. I mean, the list goes on and on of these people who are now rethinking everything. And let me tell you, the availability of information is ruining Christianity. It's absolutely ruining Christianity as we know it. There's way too much information now. Academia is changing, and everyone knows it. Even the people that the four of us used to run circles with, they're changing their tune now because of all the availability of information. Those staunch guys who, you know, they knew everything, and I sat under a couple of them and worshiped the ground they walked on. Now they're changing their tune too, because there's just too much out there now. There's far too much out there. And so guys like us can sit on this screen and wax eloquent over this stuff. And it's so much fun. It becomes mental masturbation. I know that's a really crude term, but that's the way I think about it. It does. It just becomes this thing where we're like, this is fun.
It is. What
I struggle with is I am approached by Christians on a weekly basis because of my book, because of the things that I post online, like little nuggets that make people think. I'm approached by Christians on a weekly basis, and I have a lot of conversations with them. What is just flabbergasting me, guys, is, and maybe y'all can speak into this, if we were to sit down and I were to sit across from Mark or Derek and talk about Christianity, we would immediately know what the other person thinks. Historic, creedal, confessional, canonical Christianity. He's probably talking about God the Father, Jesus the Son. The Trinity's probably somewhere in there. The gospel message is a part of that there was sin and Jesus came to atone. He was the propitiation for all of that. We would know all of that in that one conversation. If you talk to a Christian now, they don't consider any of that. They don't consider any of those terms. None of that crosses their mind. They don't care anything about the historicity of the stories, the flood, Samson. They don't care about any of that stuff. All they care about is Jesus. Jesus is my gospel. And I'm like, but wait a minute. When you throw the flood out in some of your posts, what do you mean by that? There's a theological world underneath that one story. Do you not care anything about that? Well, no, I just care about Jesus. But what does that mean? What is your gospel? Well, Jesus is love. He loves everybody. And there's just almost this very whimsical, cavalier, nondescript, non-definitive idea now, that a hybrid kind of Christianity. No one cares about any of this stuff that you and I are talking about anymore. Have y'all come across that?
I have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're wanting a response to that, I say I encourage them. In fact, I think that's the kind of Christianity I'd prefer people have. I don't want them to be mental masturbators like us. I want them to, I'd rather them be like, I have this avatar symbol. Maybe they think it's real. Maybe they don't. And this is what gives me purpose, meaning, and love. And they're like not going around smashing people in the head, and they're just being lovey-dovey, and it's their avatar. That's the kind of Christianity I want to see thrive. I don't want the theology bros and ortho bros and the Trinity bros and the hardcore, I am the high church, we are reformed, and we're going to debate you. I don't want that shit. I want all of that to be broken. I want all of that to be humbled under the weight of the fact that we don't have all the answers. I don't care what they believe at the end of the day. Yeah. I don't need them to be atheists. I don't need them to be agnostics. Even I myself am at a point as a skeptic. You hit a wall. You go, okay, we evolved on this planet. We're animals that have literally arose on this rock. And, is there meaning? You hear a lot of skeptical atheists who go, there's no ultimate meaning at all. In fact, you just derive your own meaning. Well, okay. If that is true, now what? And I feel like I need to back a few steps back from as far as I've gone and say, okay, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, fiction is my remedy to meaning and enjoying narrative. And so now, rather than just trashing books like the Bible or kind of living in that kind of like, I'm just chip on my shoulder, take everything out, make everyone not believe in something, you kind of go, Derek, you do believe in stuff, right? It's just not that. You believe in yourself. You believe in your family. You wake up with purpose and meaning when the sun rises. Why is that not a philosophy that people adopt, even if they get skeptical about the Bible? So for me, bro, like, I feel like I hit a wall where it's like, okay, let's just pretend there's nothing. Now what? We just talk about atoms and evolution all day and smack people over the head? Or are we going to finally go, you know what? Actually, I'm going to live with purpose. I'm going to live as though there is something important. And in fact, I'm reminded of a story Mark Chiachera told me one time that was a powerful example, and it really made me think. Now, this can be done in harm, and this can be done in good. And Mark is a mentalist. He's a specialist at mystery and like getting people to believe things, right? He's at the hospital, and I'm probably butchering this, Mark, but I'm telling your story. So fill me in if I miss anything.
Right.
This is really good though. This hit me, bro. This is a story that made me think. He's at the hospital and a nurse comes up to him, and he had planned this. He had it all planned. And he's like, "What's your name?" Like something to the effect of her name. She gives it, goes, "Oh my gosh. Just a few days ago, I was alone in prayer." Now, Mark doesn't even pray, okay? He doesn't believe. I was just in prayer, and God literally told me someone named Sarah would come across my path. But there's only one way to know if it's really you and if this is really God. Here, and I keep a pack of cards on me. Pick one of these cards randomly. She picks the card, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, look at this picture I took 3 days ago. The timestamps on it." He's holding that very card in a picture in his phone from 3 days ago. And the name Sarah is next to it. She's looking and she's just shocked. It was like one more little added thing, icing on the cake he did to her that just made her start to bawl. Tears. And she's broken. I mean, she's totally broken. And she says to him something like, I literally started losing hope and I felt like giving up. And then this was like the thing I needed to know that something mattered to me. Like there's something that's bigger than me that cares about me. And I felt like giving up all the bad things that are happening in my life. And Mark's like, "Well, just know that you are special. And there is something important in your life. And you do have value." And he walks away. And I'm like, "Bro, Mark, you're going to tell her, right? He said, "Hell no, I'm not going to tell her." Because that fiction gave her a sense of purpose.
Yeah, let her figure it out.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's that moment of mystery that she'll remember for the rest of her life and help her grow and learn and move forward. It's like I said at the beginning of this, mystery is so important. As we answer these questions one by one, we all like solving the crossword puzzle, right? We all like the mystery in a book. And we like solving it. We like these murder mystery shows, and then there's always a twist at the end. And I could go in. I could go into what Paul does, which I think is a real twist in the Bible. But yeah, it's that. Can you imagine anything worse than just snatching that back from that person and saying, "That was just a trick"?
Well, I mean, I can imagine something worse because I listen to Matt Dillahunty's show a lot, the Atheist Experience, and I imagine, and I hear this all the time, people who call in, "Well, I had this experience and I don't know how to explain it. It must be God," and they get so trapped by it because there's no other possible experience, therefore it must be God. And I hear this a lot, and I'm just like. And the constant response is, well, if you don't know what it is and you don't have an explanation, then why are you attributing it to God? Why can't you just settle with, I don't know? But like, so I guess my response to what you guys were just portraying there is, why wouldn't you say to this person, now you have an experience, but don't attribute it to God?
Mm-hmm.
Because I will tell you, for me, because I don't care. I genuinely just, man, there's too much in life to deal with for me to try and control other people's theological constructs. I have my own shit to worry about. I can barely put my pants on in the morning, and I have a 10 and a 12-year-old boys that they keep me busy. So I don't care. I will tell you where I do struggle, and this I will admit, I'm reading a lot of Carl Jung right now. This could all be the ego construct. It really, really could be. Somebody mentioned earlier, I think it was Derek, about alternate realities. And man, that's something that's freaking my head out right now. I've been doing a lot of reading on parallel universes and quantum physics. That's freaky shit. But here's where stuff starts to bother me. When I talk with people, if they're the nondescript new hybrid kind of Christianity, I genuinely don't care. In fact, I will encourage them and say, that's really cool, man. I would love to hear more about that. I'm supposed to have coffee next week with this girl who was explaining some stuff to me. She's like, I'd really like to explain it to you. I was like, let's go have coffee. Where I do kind of draw a line in the sand is when they make exclamations of having the corner on the market on truth.
I get it.
This is the only way to a relationship with God. That's where I'll put my hand up and go, how do you know that? Right. And then I will start to push back, because I have a vitriolic reaction to people who are trying to manipulate, emotionally manipulate people into Christianity, because that's the construct they're in, and they think everybody else needs to be in that. Because I do draw the line there, and again, that could be just ego. It really could be, but I don't care about the hybrid form. I don't like the ones who have a little bit of knowledge, just enough to damage other human beings.
I get it. I came from the same background, and I think it's a reflection of ourselves in a way. But
do you guys know any Christians, including ourselves in our past, that do not think this is the only answer to truth?
Yeah. That's what
really?
Yes, bro. That's what I'm trying to tell you. But
if they do, then they're agnostics.
Well, in a way, they don't even know enough about that to care whether they're agnostic or not. They're happy. They have found something that helps them feel fulfilled and loved. They call that Jesus, and they want everybody else to feel that Jesus love. We come from this background with a ton of baggage and these theological constructs and all the minutia, and we insert that into their construct, and they've never even heard of it before,
and they don't want to.
They don't want to. And when you start explaining it, they're like, what are you talking about? Because I assume, then so you believe that sin entered the world through one man and infected the rest of his progeny, and there had to be a propitiation for sin, and it was manifested in bulls and goats, and then the culmination of that was Jesus, who was God come in the flesh, and the hypostatic union. They're like,
well, okay, so great. So what's their
they don't care.
What's their grounds for using Jesus at all? Then
they don't care.
Why
they will say
it's what they know. It's what they know. That's it.
Yes.
So they just know the name Jesus. They know he's important. Well, they know he's important culturally. They've probably heard from their parents or a pastor. They've probably heard a very positive sermon that gave them purpose and meaning. They had an experience probably. And that's enough for them. And for you and me, we want to know the molecular level of the Greek, the syntax, and the dumb shit. I mean, we really think we're smart, but it's really dumb how far we've gone.
I don't care about all that stuff. Like half the stuff we're talking about tonight, I'm like, this is cool and this is fun, but none of this actually led me out of Christianity.
Right.
None of it. The only thing that led me out was, holy shit, there's no fucking God. It was that simple. Like there was nothing. There was nothing more than the realization that, logically speaking, faith is illogical.
Right.
Well, it's like when someone asks me, does God exist? I always come back with, define God.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the whole question then is, it's the same question as define Jesus. It's no different. It's the same question because Jesus is.
Yeah. Right. If you define God as the laws of nature and things are like that, then yeah, I believe in God.
Right. Exactly. But that's where me and my partner Ray are at. Like that's her definition of God. Like she doesn't know like Jesus has no bearing on her definition of God. But if you're going to be a Christian and you're going to claim Jesus, he is going to come into your definition of God. There's no question about that. You have to. And if you don't care about that, then what the hell are you even talking about?
But
Like,
why does it matter to you?
Yes.
Think about this. Think about this. Why does it matter to you that you care so much about their symbol that they call Jesus that gives them love? Guess what? I felt the same way, Alan. It bothered me that they don't care enough to really know their own shit. But that's a reflection of me and my irritation, the chip on my shoulder, of why I care so much about what these poor humans are trying to.
That's it.
That's why it's called personal beliefs. It doesn't matter
so
what you or I believe.
I'll tell you why it does matter to me.
Yeah.
Right.
And I do think it matters. And here's
But
why.
for them, for those people, I'm not talking about the people who push Christianity down people's
Right.
throats or try to coerce people. We're talking about a specific brand where they don't really care. They could probably be around a Buddhist or a Hindu and they go Shiva and we go, I call him Jesus, but hey, high five, buddy. You call him Shiva. Oh, you don't believe? Well, you believe in love, don't you? Yeah, I believe in love. I'm an atheist. Oh, well, we share the same belief in the good thing. Notice how cool they're willing to be flexible. That's the kind of person Dustin's describing here. And I know that kind of Christian that isn't like you and me who are like, Jesus is one with the Father. And like, you know what I mean? Like, that's all I'm saying. I get your irritation because it's the others. It's the, I'm going to tell everyone the truth. And that's what Dustin, I think we share that irritation toward that kind of Christian. Personally, I think it's because we see ourselves in them. Because I was that asshole, dude. I was that guy, you know?
So it's more than that for me. Like my concern about it, and I feel like we've gone completely off topic for the show. So, I'm going to try to bring us back again, but I would just round this out here. My concern with it is it's a guilt by association thing. So would any of you be comfortable with saying, oh, well, even though you've just pointed out that my particular view supports and promotes and condones the rape of women on a regular basis, I'm just going to sit here and adhere to it, even though I don't really particularly agree to all the specifics of it, but I identify with a particular viewpoint that condones the rape of women. And if any of you win that, would you say, oh, yeah, I don't care what you say. I'm just going to sit here in my comfortability, even though I don't share all the viewpoints, but I associate with a title that relates to the rape of all women.
But they don't care about that.
But they should, and that's the problem. Like, they're still associating.
But if you ask them, Alan, you ask them and you say, hey, do you condone rape or killing of women or slavery or whatever, and they tell you, hell no, I would never condone that. And you go, well, listen, I'm going to tell you about your Jesus, who, by the way, is in the New Testament. It's a book that's attached to another book, and at the time this was written, slavery was condoned. And they'd go, I don't care what the Bible says.
That's exactly right.
Yep. And they're like, but you're doing exactly what I was just simply saying, that we care. And we have all the knowledge about these things and know that slavery is endorsed. And we know that, God is sending genocide and God is literally like all that crazy stuff. I mean, dude, the flood, if you take that in some way literalistic, this is human genocide of all humanity, right? They're not looking for that message. And in fact, I know Christians who would be like, fuck that book. Fuck that story. They go, where's the story?
Why are you identifying yourself as a Christian?
But why does it matter? At that point, why does it matter? And I'm telling you, man, I've had an epiphany in the last month where these new hybrid Christians, I'm with Derek. I don't care, man. Let it roll. Let them have their little Jesus love gospel thing, because they don't care anything about the stuff that we used to care about. They don't care anything about what some Christians care about. And if you talk to them about it, they would be utterly repulsed and say, well, that's not what I believe. In fact, because you have to remember, man, I have a very large company and realtors know me all over the state. So I'm at the gym the other day and this lady comes up to me and she's like, Dustin, hey, it's me. And I'm like, oh, hey, what's going on? I'd never met her before. I don't know. I've never met most of the people that my team works with. I saw something you posted the other day and that's not the Jesus that I worship. And so of course let's talk, and I assume something and I'm wanting to project all of this stuff onto this lady. And I could tell 45 seconds into my little diatribe of bullshit that she was like, whoa, what are you even talking about? And so I looked at her and I was like, well, do you believe in sin? She was like, well, I mean, I believe people do wrong stuff. And I was like, but that's not sin. Sin carries with it an eternal judgment. She was like, no. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, the more I begin to talk with these people, they are like Buddhist. That's what they're like. They are very much like Buddhist, and they don't care. They're like, let it slide. Hey man, whatever you can believe whatever you want to believe.
So my concern with this is there is still a standard by which faith is a foundation for belief. And it's whatever the hell they want to believe. And it sounds to me like you guys are saying, let's just excuse it because they believe in something that's not dangerous. But perhaps on the surface, that specific belief is not dangerous. But if you choose to live your life by a faith model, who's to say that that's not going to translate into some other area of life by which it is going to become dangerous? You can't just let people off the hook because they want to live by faith, but that specific thing isn't dangerous. How do we not know that they're not going to then say, oh, I live by faith, that rape is a good thing? Like, it's just...
Can I live my life in fear that people might do stuff?
Yeah, well, you sure can if they're living by faith. Like, faith is a dangerous model by which to live by.
What about the full? And I've thought about this too. What about the worldview that is constructed in the hyper skeptic? Let's just say the extreme skeptic. We evolved. There is no ultimate meaning. There is nothing. There's no purpose. You literally are an animal. You evolved from a germ into what we are today. You look at us as animal species. So the value of life is not, really significant. If you bring value to it, that's philosophy. You're bringing an outside construct that science doesn't compute. You're just another animal like all other animals. All of these values that we bring come deeply rooted inherently in how we exist as animals on the planet, but they have connection to traditions that we carry. And I feel like what's going on when we become so scientific minded is we're saying, let's divorce all these traditions because there's baggage, there's bad past. It's like removing every statue of every person who ever owned a slave. Stop reading anyone who owned a slave. Fuck Plato, fuck the philosophers. We shouldn't have anyone that we look to in the past because of the deadly sins of the past. As if humans aren't interpreting the world through their modern current context, even with the ugly text of the ancient world. I think humans are usually better than that. But I see that my fear is you hit that wall, there's nothing. There's nothing. You have no hope. There is nothing at all, right? There's nothing to have faith in. And someone who's nihilistic in this regard could sit there and go, what's the fucking point? There's nothing. Okay, why do you care? If there is no ultimate meaning, right, to them, they'll say there's no ultimate meaning. You're bringing meaning to the table by saying, I care what other people believe because I'm worried that they're going to believe these things. Soviet Russia, human behavior. They were an atheistic empire practically. And look at the kinds of things they did as a non-believing empire that didn't carry over the...
That's not because of atheism.
Well, I'm not going to say it's but that played a significant role in their national identity and what they did. But I'm simply saying, like, the reverse they'll say is you don't have meaning or purpose. So if you're so concerned about it, right, what I would advise is give them something to replace it with. And if you replace it with, there's no meaning, fuck your God. There's no God. Like, that Dillahunty shit never sold me, bro. I never came over to Dillahunty. I never listened to the Dawkins. I didn't hear the Hitchens. I didn't care what those very rough atheists had to say. They did not do it for me. I only enjoyed them once I became an atheist and a skeptic. It was the Marks, the loving, tender, gentle Mark Chiacheras, who said, can I show you some interesting stuff? He replaced it with some other model. And if you're going to expect them to replace the avatar of Jesus, because it's so important that they don't have that, because there might be faith involved, then you got to give them something. And if there's nothing to replace it, dude, they're never going to let it go if you don't have something better or equal to fill that gap that they have that's psychological getting into Jung here. And that's all I'm saying is if it's your concern, my advice, if I were giving you a war plan, here's your battle tactics, here's how you can do it, you're not going to get it just trying to tear down. you want to replace it with something that doesn't make it feel like you're attacking, but rather giving them all that purpose and need they need. Mind you, this is not scientific. This is philosophical. So you're bringing in meaning from a philosophy that you can look to nature and find certain animals do. But if I look to nature, I could find the equivalent of the opposite of evil, of animals killing animals, and go, it's nature. It's justified. So what ultimate grounds do you have a reason for saying we shouldn't be killing each other? Ultimately, there's no meaning and purpose. And you just want to say, well, my philosophy is we don't want to harm people. And my philosophy is I want less harm overall for all humanity. Who's to say that your worldview is correct? We're animals on a planet. If we all go extinct, it is what it is. And that's how they're viewing it, is going like, who are you? You literally, you have to like adjust your morality as time continues to go on. And don't get me wrong, I'm with you. I think it is subjective. But like, there's some things I want to say are pretty solid. You know, you don't want to hurt other people. But where did that come from? Where did that come from? Intuition and stuff.
I think morality does have a stance, but that's not the subject tonight. But to your point, I'm not disagreeing in any way, shape, or form about replacing it with something else. That wasn't my contention whatsoever. My concern was it doesn't matter. Let anybody just believe and let's let faith continue. I personally think faith has been one of the most harmful things in our society and in our culture for generations and centuries. I think faith is a construct that is damaging because it is no bearing and no foundation whatsoever by which to determine anything in reality. And people just get to believe whatever they want, and that brings harm, I think. So that was my contention. It's not to say that when you try to take away somebody's faith that you just leave them and say, good luck, folks. No, I agree with you. Like, you need to replace it with something, and I think that that's what we're trying to do. But I don't feel comfortable with just saying, oh, you guys like faith, but your faith is not harmful here at this point yet. I think that's dangerous, because if you just let people continue to have faith, it does develop into something more dangerous.
Just so we're on the same page, what do you mean when you say faith? Believing in something that you have no evidence for?
Yeah, pretty much.
So if I believe that...
And I know you don't like Dillahunty, and that's fine. You made that clear. But I do like Dillahunty, and I'll use his definition. It's the excuse people give when they don't have a good reason.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe you'd have to give like explicit examples. I know that there can be clear examples where faith would be bad, but most of the time, I feel like faith that these people that Dustin's talking about are people more like, we're going to die, and they have hope that something else is out there and there's meaning to them in the world. So they're looking forward to tomorrow. I don't think that they're oftentimes engaging in what I have heard Dillahunty and others use the term to mean, and that is this apocalyptic kind of the theological baggage that comes with the belief in faith that, hey, God's going to come in and usher in. I don't need to clean up my streets. I don't need to recycle. I don't need to do this or that, because this is part of God's plan. And therefore I could just throw my hands up, chill out, and let the earth go into chaos because it's all coming to an end soon. They don't even know about all that stuff in their mind.
What I'm suggesting is the idea of faith of, what if your God that you just have faith in comes to you and tells you all of a sudden that you need to take 700 people and tell them to drink the grape juice and kill themselves because they're going to see God in some alien ship. We've seen this shit happen with people like Jim Jones. Faith is dangerous. It's very dangerous. And if you continue to let people live by it instead of by scientific evidence, or at least some sort of a system that can demonstrate why something can be true or not true, just living by faith where it's, well, I just believe it. Like that's potentially dangerous, because even if it's not dangerous today with how you're approaching love, fine. But if that's the way you're going to approach truth, you're going to end up being the next Jim Jones or a follower of Jim Jones. Like, it is a dangerous method. So I do think it needs to be squashed, and I think it needs to be squashed as quickly as possible.
Mark, what do you think?
It reminds me of a line in John Wick. I don't know if you guys are fans or not, but I forget the guy's name who manages the Continental. He says to John Wick, the thing that separates men from the animals are rules. And he's just talking about we have to have a set of rules that we can all live by that keep us civilized,
Yes.
And I agree with you, Alan. It reminds me of Andrea Yates, who strapped her two kids into their car seats and drove her car into the lake and said, "God told me to do that."
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And she killed her two kids. And I think where the line needs to be drawn is if you're hurting or harming someone else or their property, that's the line. We can't go out and believe because there's nothing, we can go line up people, put them on their knees, shoot them, and then bury them in a ditch. You know what I'm saying? Because there is nothing.
Yes,
So
and the only way
if
your approach works is if you eliminate faith, because as long as faith exists as a reason or a way to determine something, at any given point, some random person steps up like a Jim Jones and says, well, I have faith that this system is not working, and I'm going to choose to kill people by having them drink the grape juice. Like, at some point, that system needs to be eliminated altogether, and you'd have to come to a dialogue to say, hey, here's the definition by which we are going to determine morality. I don't care whether you like Matt Dillahunty's definition or not. We can come up with one. That's where communication comes in. I love the idea of what's beneficial, what's most beneficial to humanity, and what's least harmful. That's a great way to determine.
Yeah. I that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the rhetoric. That's why I brought up.
No,
the
I
other
don't like
atheists.
Mike's rhetoric.
But-
I hate
but-
his rhetoric. Frankly,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's tempered too much.
But here's the thing: I would identify the Jim Jones and stuff. I understand that you're dealing with systems where faith is involved, but I'm not so sure it was faith that caused them to drink Kool-Aid. I'm not so sure faith is the thing. Because I'll give you an example the other day, and this is not to get political, but there was a trans person on a video who obviously was born a female. And they literally said, I want to be the first man to abort a child. Historically, they want to purposely be the first man to abort a child. Now, clearly, this can wade into the when do you think it's life? At what stage is it permissible? And this gets all into the shit. I don't even want to get into these details, but I want to make a point to go, where's faith in this? And someone might look at that and go, that's ridiculous. Who would want to get pregnant on purpose, say this is what they identify as, and be the first man to abort a child on purpose so that they're making history? No Jesus involved, no religion. And I guess this example I'm trying to use, which is a moral one, and I know it's a quagmire of a debate, but there's so much criminality. There's so much horrific bad things that happen divorced from religious contexts and within religious context that I'm not so sure faith is the reason. Now, if someone was more skeptical and they had the thinking skills that you and I have, and they're much more cautious of the Jim Jones, I think it could be prevented for more humans who are actually using those kind of critical faculties and going, bro, you're trying to swindle me. You're literally manipulating me. But whether the context is a pyramid scheme, whether it's religious, whether it's political, any and all systems are going to carry this harm. I think the problem is humans in general and not necessarily faith driven. And so you could say, well, okay, if we squashed all faith, guess what's still going to keep happening? Under different environments with different circumstances, killing, death, murders, mass killings, there's going to be things where there's going to be leaders. And
but you're missing the point. Like my point isn't that eliminating faith eliminates all atrocities. That's never going to happen. My point is by eliminating faith, you eliminate a significant part of atrocities. Like if you can just get rid of that segment where we no longer have to deal with people saying, well, I believe some special agent of the universe that I can't define came to me and told me to do thus.
Right. But why is that not a mentally ill person?
It might be.
Why does it have to be faith? Because I thought I was hearing Jesus too, but I was like trying to want to hear him. And
I'm not suggesting that eliminating faith eliminates all atrocities.
Right.
That's my point. I'm not saying that it fixes everything. I'm saying it fixes this.
But isn't your definition of faith believing in something there's not really any evidence for, right? How do you get all humans to stop believing in things? Because that's not just a Christian concept. Almost every religious system has this belief in things they
Exactly.
don't have evidence of. Like, I'm going to die one
They
day,
want
and
to get rid of all religious systems. That's
right.
exactly my point. Yes.
Whether it's reincarnation, whether it's I'm going to be resurrected one day or whatever, it gives them hope when death. What are you going to fill in for the people who are going to die one day who wish that the party doesn't end? You want them to somehow just come to reality and realize, like, actually, you know what? I'm going to die, and it's kind of sucks. The party's going to end, and there's really like no,
Look,
you know what I'm saying?
here's the thing: is what's more important, truth or dreaming?
Well, that's the thing. What
I
is
think dreaming. I think dreaming can be more important than truth sometimes.
Okay, and what scenarios is that more important? Like, I'm not suggesting dreaming within truth isn't important, but dreaming instead of truth? Come on, man. Seriously?
Well, yeah. I mean, I look at my boys and their imagination, where stories come from, and the mysteries that Mark talks about, and these incredible things that we love to hear about and watch on the big screen. And watching kids is an amazing thing because their imagination knows no limits. I mean, they really believe they can do things and see things and hear things, and they tell these stories, and I don't tell them, hey, I want you to stop. Quit using that imagination. That's not okay, because that's
No,
not
and I
fun.
agree with you, and that is okay because they're kids.
Nope. So then your standard is subjective.
Yes, I suppose.
Well, see, then that's not
Because
that's odd.
even morality is subjective, dude. So you're going to suggest that there's any?
Well, I agree, and so that's why I say, if it's okay for a kid, why can't it be okay for a Buddhist or a Hinduist or someone else, as long as, like what Mark said, they're not hurting anybody else or taking over anybody's property or transgressing
No,
some.
I agree. That's the concern I have. As long as my concern is, it doesn't remain in the as long as when it comes to faith. I have seen too much damage happen when people who just believe and have faith, that faith causes damage. That's the problem.
So you're talking about a very myopic, particular kind of thing that could result in a possibility or what if. And I would probably agree with that, but I personally, just for me, I cannot fathom living feeling a need to somehow control everybody else's possibilities or what if. I can barely deal with my own life, much less having.
But also, just FYI, dreaming and faith are not the same thing. Even though we went down that
road. Yeah. I mean, and that's fine. But yeah, I just can't imagine living like that. I don't have a problem with people believing things, even if it's just by faith alone. I don't. Not right now. Maybe one day I will. I don't know. But
you don't, as long as it's not bringing harm. But
yeah,
harm, then you have a problem with it. And
of course I do.
Faith eventually always brings harm, because it cannot be restricted to just, I believe it's just love. Eventually, it's going to, I believe it's good for me, and I don't give a shit what it does to you because it's what does good for me.
I don't know. That would have to be somehow provable, and I don't know how you would quantify that. Mark, what do you think? Do you think every form of faith should be squashed and gone?
I used to teach creativity classes to Disney Imagineers and how to be creative and stuff. And there are certain things you can do to enhance creativity. And, I keep thinking of, in Star Trek, which was a TV show in the 60s, right? They walk around with these electronic pads and their touch button consoles that do different things, and they have laser weapons and called phasers and stuff like this. And what do we have today? We're walking around with iPads, and we have touch controls on our microwave ovens, and things that we dreamt of, that we use that creativity in order to bring something good about. But those things can also be used for bad. It reminds me of like today's back and forth with AI technologies. I mean, in 5 years, AI will have evolved 1,000,000 years above humans. Think about that for a minute.
Yeah, it's trippy.
Okay. It'll be smarter than all of us collectively on this planet. Okay. I saw the other day where they were having conversations with each other in a language that they themselves created in order to prevent us from understanding what they were saying. That was two different AIs competing. Now, in a lot of ways, I'm like, unplug it, get that thing, But
We've seen this before.
but in other ways, I'm like, man, could we cure cancers and could we, use those things for good? We've dreamt up those things. Now we have to be responsible with those things as best we can and hope they don't destroy us.
But I think everything you said is within the bounds of what Alan is. It's empirical, even though you're dreaming it up, it's within the realm of reality. And I get it. I guess I'd want to hone in this question. Dustin's referring to you, Mark, to get more specific.
Yeah.
Do you think you should have told that lady at that hospital that you tricked her? Because you tapped into her faith. You tapped into her beliefs. Was that an evil thing you did? And are you not contributing to the problem that Alan's literally saying? Or should she have not walked away and had meaning and felt like she was loved and had purpose that day and walked away that changed probably the rest of her life, or at least a good chunk for a long time, made her feel like she had something to hold on
look
to.
Forward to.
Right.
Boy, Derek, that was about as clear as can possibly be, and it made me sound like a complete asshole.
I did it on purpose, damn it.
But bro,
notice how I added the icing on the cake. I was like, and it gives her purpose, and it gives her meaning, and it makes her feel like
I am convinced that people believe what they want to believe.
It's a form of self-delusion.
It just
okay.
is.
So just before you go on, Mark, right there, that's enough for me to help people say faith is a terrible thing to live by. Why would you want anybody to live by self-delusion? But I'll just leave that hanging.
There's a positive self-delusion. There's positive and negative. So like I tell myself all the time, bro, I tell myself, you are the man. You can do oh, I'm not kidding. No. I'm dead serious. I'm dead serious.
I believe that about myself. You don't believe that?
No. I do, but I'm reinforcing, especially. So it's like psyching yourself out. It's like the general who stands before the army during the Alexander conquest and says, "Today, men, we will win. We will defeat them."
That's motivation.
I know, but it's based on the faith and belief. It's belief without the evidence of us actually already winning. And guess what? The men fight harder. You know the famous saying, a man who thinks he can and a man who thinks he can't, usually both are right. This is the point that taps into this faithish thing. But that's
man. That's not faith.
Well, you're believing in something that isn't real. It hasn't happened. It's not something that is.
Why can't it be real that you're the man?
Well, you can. You can.
Well, why can't it be real that someone believes in something that does good for the rest of their life rather than you assuming that it might turn into something bad?
Because of the danger factor. It's risky.
But there's no evidence of that. You're assuming something.
There's a lot of evidence that. Do we really need to go through history?
There's evidence that it can, but there's also evidence that it doesn't.
I mean, I don't see much evidence of faith being a good thing in anybody's life. It is the deception of truth in everybody's life. It is a delusion. Every one of us who have escaped Christianity cannot deny that
but Christianity, the kind of Christianity we're talking about, is not the standard.
It's not just Christianity. We were deluded by faith. That's the root problem.
No, I would disagree. I would say it was the construct and the tenets of that belief system that I had faith in that were the problem.
But it's still based on faith in something. And how do you know when your faith is believing something real? or something good. You can't. That's the whole problem with faith. There's no way of determining whether your faith is based on something good or bad. But anyway, I want to let Mark answer. I feel bad. Like I derailed it.
Sorry, Mark.
Go back.
No,
Go ahead.
no.
And tell me why I'm an asshole based on Derek. Go
No.
Please do. I love you guys.
I think there's a fine line there. It's like, I start asking myself, what is freedom then? We all want, I think that we all strive for freedom. It's like, and I'll give you an example. It's like the vaccine, right, for COVID. Some people really believed that thing, was going to prevent COVID from happening. And, government told us it was true and you believed it and you took the jab, right? But then there's others and they listen to, other scientists and doctors and stuff that's saying, wait a minute, we think this could be harmful, blah, blah, blah. But you have that freedom to decide for yourself, is this true or is this true, based on the knowledge that I have, in order to risk my life on this thing. You see what I'm saying? Some people believe that it's true.
That's also not faith. That's not at all the same thing that we're talking about when we talk about faith.
I don't know. You have faith in the certain doctors, or you have faith in your...
No, that's not faith.
That's why I asked you to define, because every time that is a common colloquial term for faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
I believe in something. I have no actual way to listen. I'm no like geneticist, or I'm no like virologist. I cannot assess this. I cannot determine. I have no way. I am completely trusting in these other experts. And there are two voices amongst the experts with total opposing views. If you jab yourself, you're going to die. If you don't, you're going to die. So there's a faith decision here, and it taps into the faith that I think we're talking about, Alan. But if you're saying, no,
not at all.
What is faith then? What is faith?
Justin, you read my book. I mean, I specifically lay out 2 layers of faith in my book. There is a layer of faith, it's the first layer, where we're talking about confidence in a certain system. And so you decide whether or not the system you're going to determine your belief system from is accurate, a good system, a way to determine truth. And so you have confidence in that system. Faith, by definition, is confidence, and I understand that.
Or deduction.
Was that?
Deduction?
Deduction might be a good way. Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's entirely different than the second layer of faith, by which religions determine that there is a God and they're going to live by this God's system and rule book. It has no evidence, no way to determine what's right and what's wrong. It's just, I believe it because I believe it. And if you ask me questions, I get to make up whatever I want.
Okay, so see, all 4 of us sitting here would reject that.
That's my point. That's the faith I'm talking about is the problem. And that's the faith I think Mark gave to that girl. And that's the problem I have, is that girl walked away with a faith saying, oh, God is real. That's what I'm suggesting. And that faith can lead to a lot of danger because there's no substantive way by which to determine whether something's good, bad, evil, good, or whatever, or even right or wrong, because it's just whatever the fuck I decide it is, because I have faith.
Yeah, I mean,
I felt the struggle when I heard Mark tell me this story. When I first heard it, I was like, why didn't you tell her? And then I also have had,
I'm not here by the way, because I would have probably done the same thing in that situation. I'm not saying I don't mean to make this about Mark and you evil.
No. I get it. And this is not to make Mark look like an asshole. Trust me.
One of us has to be. I
think every Christian watching this is going to think we're all assholes anyway. So it doesn't really matter.
But I can feel. I guess it's like I think we all feel when I painted that narrative that Mark actually, told me and experienced. I think part of us can empathize with this person who legitimately actually suffering and struggling. And now what I'm saying is if we're really risen above that, we're so enlightened, we're so beyond faith. There's a point in which I feel like the behavior on how we engage that world, we need a better tactic. And it's not calling into a show and yelling at a believer and screaming cuss words at them for being dumb fucking idiots. Because that's exactly what I watch all day by atheists. And that's why I would have never come over if it wasn't for people like Mark, who gently, lovingly, empathetically, and understanding what faith is in the definition you're describing, understands that the best way you could do is grab their hand and go, walk with me, brother. Walk with me.
Yeah. So, okay, look, let's present this scenario, because this is what Christians love to present to non-Christians, is the deathbed scenario. So let's say you are in a hospital and you walk by some room and you feel drawn into that room, and there's this guy and he's got 3 minutes to live, and you sit down and he says, will you just hold my hand so I don't die alone? You say, absolutely. And you hold that guy's hand, and that guy says, I'm just so glad that I have faith in Jesus Christ. I'm about to draw my last breath and meet him on the other side. Do you go, oh, bro, we got 65 seconds for me to help you see that is dangerous?
I actually have an example, and it's a real one. I'm glad you brought this analogy up. One of my close friends, who was one of my best friends, overdosed and died on fentanyl. He went brain dead. Oxygen didn't get to his brain. He overdosed, and he was a potato. And they took him to the hospital. They pulled the plug a day or two later, right? Because his organs started failing. His family called me that night after he died. They pulled the plug. They had been praying all day. They're Catholic family. And his sister was on the phone with me crying, could barely get a word out. And she said, it's okay. He was too good. That's why God took him. And she said, but I know he's in heaven, and he was too good for the world. You know what I told her? And I was not a believer at this time. And I was actually a chip on my shoulder more than I am today. I was much more aggressive, right? I said, you're right. You are right. I let her feel comfort, and I left it at that and didn't even go into any of my beliefs. I didn't care to. It gave her at that moment, through the trauma, purpose. It gave her something. So
Yeah,
this is hard, bro. You know what I mean?
It's why I asked Derek not to say anything, publicly, because I didn't want my mother, who was aged, to know what I believe, because she would have felt her whole life was trashed.
So what you guys are discussing here are more along the lines of either etiquette versus ethical decisions versus what's better in the long run for humanity. Like Dustin, the example you brought up and the two examples you guys were supporting there. So that's almost very similar to the whole famous analogy. You're on a train, and if you go one way, you're going to kill one person because they're tied to the track. Or if you decide to go the other way, you're going to kill 500 people. Which way do you go? I don't want to kill anybody. This is a sucky scenario. It sucks no matter which way you choose. You're going to kill somebody, and it's awful. But most people would say, well, I guess you go to kill the one person because it's less people killed. Either way, you're killing somebody, and it sucks. So that's kind of the scenario you're portraying here, because there's no good answer to that particular situation.
But I think there is a good answer. You just let that person die believing what they believe.
And that's the point. And I think, yes, in that scenario, I would probably agree with you, although there could just as well be a case for the 500 scenario to say, yeah, but the person on that track is my mom.
Like, I would rather...
Right. And that suddenly changes the scenario. So, I don't know always what's best. It's going to be on a case-by-case scenario. But
okay, so that's an important thing you just said, because that's really important. Because here's what I think. We can become the very thing we despise when we deconstruct. I despise fundamentalists because they leave no room for situation, empathy, humanity. They're just strict fundamentalists. Well, coming out of Christianity, we can become idealists. and there is one idea, and that is it, and that is the only way. And we can become so stringent fundamentally that we become the very thing that we hate, that we left. And I do not want to be that.
No, and that's fair. And I think that's fair. And I think that we all should take that caution. And I think that's very, very smart. I think what I'm trying to project here is typically what I hear from Christians is, well, all atheists have faith too. You all believe a chair will hold you up. Dude, if you think the chair holding you up is the same faith as believing in God, you're absolutely mind fucked beyond degree. Like, and that's what I'm trying to suggest is the kind of faith they're talking about is absurd, it's ludicrous, and it causes people to believe stupid shit that could actually cause damage to the human race.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. I mean, and I think we would all agree that there are certain forms of faith, they are normally attached to Christianity, not other religious systems. Man, well, I'm telling you, dude, Buddhists think very philosophically and very critically. They do. So
they do. Some sects do not, and it's much
right.
like Christianity.
Christianity typically, and especially Catholicism as well, as a whole, man, critical thinking is checked at the door. It really is. And so I agree most times that kind of a faith is very nonsensical. And they come up with all sorts of goofy things like the chair analogy and all that. And we go, that's not at all what we're talking about. But it comforts me. I think this was a fruitful conversation because I think people who hear you, Alan, and where we got to are going to go, oh, because there is a time and a place to put your hand up and say, wait a minute, no. Let me ask some questions right now because I'm curious about something. Mm-hmm. And through asking questions, not attacking, but asking questions, people go, and they realize they don't know what they're talking about. And
I want to tell you something, Dustin. What you said there is so important because when I discovered these things on my own, about the astrotheology and all this stuff, scared me to death. I'm married. How's my wife going to take this? How are my kids going to take this? I don't want a divorce. I don't want to lose my children.
I almost killed myself. I wrote about it in my book.
Okay. And I had to say to myself, how can I approach this in a way that's not going to be like this knee-jerk reaction? And it was it was like over a year. But I would ask certain questions of them and make them answer them themselves, because self-discovery will lead them to right thinking.
Man.
On their own.
That's powerful.
And because I did that, my whole family sees and believes what I'm talking about.
So does mine.
Yeah.
Okay. But it took me a long time. I had to, it's kind of like, Derek was saying when we had our conversations, it was hours and hours. And I mean, he would get these notebooks and he was like taking notes and he was like, oh my God, I saw this today about merry-go-rounds. And, I was telling him about, how almost all of Disney's stories, and I consider Walt Disney to be the greatest storyteller of our time. Okay. But all of his stories basically come from like the Grimm fairy tales. They're all son stories. I mean, I have this book, I could send it to you as a PDF or whatever, but it's fairy tales and their origins, and how most of them are about the winter solstice and stuff. Like if you watch Beauty and the Beast, right? It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
The castle is all dark and gloomy and it's in this forest that's dying. It's winter outside, and then when Beauty comes along and gives the beast a kiss, it's spring and the flowers all come out and the young animals are being born. And, you know, this is all a solstice story. This is all about the winter solstice. And people have no clue about that. It's a very subtle thing, but it's all based on these myths and this mythology, but it's very impregnated with importance. You know, it has meaning. It's like when I say myth, I don't just say, oh, that's just a myth or that's just
Like
a
a
fairy
lie.
tale or a lie.
Right.
It's very meaningful, and it has a lot of substance behind it that, you know, we learn from, I think, over time. That's why the wisdom sayings were cherished. You know, it's a good thing, right? Not to steal from your neighbor. I mean, I don't like being stolen, you know, my stuff being stolen. I don't like somebody killing my kid, right? Or sleeping with my wife. These are general things that we've learned over time that are good and that make society a good place, you know, if we stick to these rules.
Again, Alan, I think, and help me if anyone has an objection, say so. But I think I agree with what I think Alan's contention is this literalistic lens through which people believe things. We go into Lord of the Rings and we all watch it and we are in the movie. I mean, like, we are there with Frodo as he's going to the mountain of Mordor.
True.
Okay. There's so much morality, ethics. There's so much deep intuitive meaning and value from this fiction. Meaning it's myth, but there's truth in the myth. And when I define truth, I mean value that we're learning as lessons through narrative, not empirical necessarily, not scientific, not test tube. It's truth, though, in a different manner.
It's too intuitive.
Right. But if someone walks out and goes, this shit happened, like that, you know, and they're running around trying to tell people,
Right.
you know, that's kind of the thing I think.
Because it happened, I am now Gandalf.
Exactly.
I am Gandalf and blah, blah, blah.
And I think you're nailing the point I was trying to make is at what point does faith stop doing that? And
right.
So yes, everything you just that whole analogy is absolutely on point with what I was thinking. Yes.
Yeah, and I guess where I'm at today now, as someone who's been indulging in the Bible for a long time, kind of hit the chip on my shoulder. I did the whole like total attack on, you know, Christianity, and I'm still going to be the cynic that I am. I'm going to be the Lucian. I'm going to kind of mock the ridiculous. Okay, I'm going to do it. So anyone who's watching, just brace. That's part of me. But what I am going to do is try to highlight the value in the narrative more. I'm always tearing down, but it's not who I am in the real world, bro. I don't care who you are. You come up to me and you're like, dude, this guy, like, the sun shines when he walks in the room. Like, he's an optimistic, fun dude to be around. Like, this guy's a happy guy. He doesn't spend his day just poking holes and like constantly critiquing everything. He's much more like finding ways to meet you halfway, finding ways to be like, yeah, you know what? That was a great story. Yeah, you know, I understand the meaning there. And meeting people there, I think, can lead people to go, what do you believe about this? And how do you?
People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So
I know it's like I often walk this. You know, being a mystery performer, I walk this really narrow line. Okay, because I present myself as a mystery performer and that this is for entertainment. But I'm telling you right now, the stuff that I do is so strong that people walk out of there believing it, whether or not you tell them it's false. But I've done my job. Okay. I feel like I've given you entertainment. But I'm telling you right now, these people leave there absolutely 100% convinced that I can do these things. Okay. And it's like, am I a jerk for doing that? Or am I
you ass idiots for believing it after you tell them that it's false?
I can't help that. I can't help that.
No, you can't. Exactly. You can't help that.
You know, it's like, so I do, it's like, I don't know how you guys feel about this stuff, but like I'll do tarot readings with tarot cards. I'll use pendulums, and I'll use crystals and crystal balls and things like that, because I portray myself as a wizard, okay? A modern day wandering wizard. And that's kind of how people see me around town. I walk into La Rosa's, which is like a Italian restaurant here chain. And I'm telling you, within 5 seconds of me coming in the door, everybody in the back knows he's here. He's here, And then I have like some waitress come out. Hey, the guys in the back would really like you to do something for them. Can you do something for them? You know what I mean? And I'll make a prediction or a prophecy, and it will immediately come true. Okay? Even when there's no such thing as prophecy.
Right.
Oh, you mean like you order a steak and it comes out?
Yeah.
Wow.
I might say to this waitress, and I have said this before. I've said, "Wow, have we met before?" And then she'll say something, or she'll be wearing something, and I'll take note of that, and I'll say, "You know what? I think I had a premonition about you today." And then there's this intrigue, right? Well, what was the premonition? What are you talking about? And then I'll write it down on the back of a business card. And I'll say, if you were to pick a number between 1 and 100, could be your favorite number, could be your lucky number, could be your birthday, could be your son's jersey number in high school, whatever. What number would that be? And she tells me 23. I open my notes app on my phone, and I've got 2 lists. And one of the lists, I'm working on this thing where I tell them, are you young at heart, or are you an old soul? And so I have a list of 100 different Disney characters, and I have another list of 100 different alcoholic beverages. Okay? And I'll say, out of the 2 lists, which one would you choose? And she'll say maybe Disney characters, right? And I'll say, now go find the character that was at that number that you're just thinking of, and tell me what character that is. She'll say Bambi or something, right? I'll say, just for the heck of it, let's go to the other list and look at your number and what's next to it. Oh, Captain Morgan. Okay, great. I'm going to give you one opportunity to change your mind. Do you want to stay with Bambi, or do you want to go with Captain Morgan? She says, I'll stay with Bambi. Then I take out the business card that's been in front of her the whole time, and I'll turn it over, and it'll say, I predict you're going to choose Bambi instead of Captain Morgan.
So before all of it, before you even
did anything, I write this in front of them so they can see there's something on the back. I even I'll
become a Christian immediately.
Okay. So I did this for this waitress, right? And you have to admit, that's really strong.
Yeah, it's cool.
Okay. I mean, I told this waitress what she was going to choose and what she was not going to choose out of 2 lists that have 100 items on it. And only she was thinking of that number. Okay. That's really, really strong. It was so strong that a tear just came down her cheek. And she said to me, "That's the greatest thing that has ever happened to me in my entire life." And she said,
Wow.
can I hug you?" And I didn't know what to do, at that point. So I just hugged her back. And I just said, "I was just hoping to give you that moment of mystery that you'll remember for the rest of your life." And she said, "Oh yeah, you did that."
So I'm guessing that if she didn't choose the list you expected her to choose, you wouldn't have showed her your card.
I would have shown her the card.
Oh, you
Because,
still?
yeah,
Oh, what would you have done
because
then?
I will always be 100% right.
He knows that going into it, he's going to be right.
No,
Isn't-
but
Yeah.
what if you were wrong? Is what I'm saying. Like if you had written what you said that she chose the wrong
That's
list.
part of
I
the
think
trick, though, Alan.
That's part of the mystery.
That's the mystery, the trick. It's in that, so you can't be wrong. He
How?
cannot.
How? What if she chose the
It's
other
his
list?
trick. It's his trick. You don't get it. That's
process.
It's
No.
something. It's something. Look, it's something I've come up with.
I mean, you're good at this, obviously.
I make up my own effects. It's interesting because I've learned a lot of things from the ancient world, and I use principles that they used in order to trick people.
Well, I mean,
Okay.
no doubt you're good at what you do. Obviously.
Yeah.
I was just
Yeah,
curious.
this
Is there ever a time that you were wrong?
my last show. It's interesting. I did that effect, right?
Yeah.
And I got the number wrong, right? And she said, "No, you didn't get it right." And I was like, "Well, what number did you choose?" And she said 72. I said, "Huh. Well, that makes sense now." And I opened my phone and I opened a videotape that I had videoed earlier in the day. And it was me standing at this whiteboard back behind me. And it said, I know this is going to sound strange, but I had a premonition today that I'm going to meet someone tonight who's going to choose this number. And I had like a question mark on the whiteboard, and I erased it. And I turned around and I wrote a number and I circled it. And I said, I think it's going to be this number. And I walked away from the whiteboard and it said 72 on
Oh
Okay.
man.
I love it.
Oh, that's creepy. That's just creepy. Now.
I know.
It's going to creep me out now, bro.
Yeah.
But
I have to go. My boys just got home, so I have to go. It's about to be super crazy loud.
yeah, here I am. I'm retired, but I consult for magicians all over the world. They call me. Usually, my day starts at 9 at night and goes till about 6 in the morning because they're usually from England or India or some other part of the world, and we spend hours on how I can help them enhance their stuff or
Dude,
do stuff.
dude, your stuff
think
is
that-
amazing. Dustin's
Yeah,
got
that's amazing, man.
Listen, guys. So this show took an entirely different direction than it was
I'm
supposed
sorry, I could.
to. No,
I think it was great.
Everything was
I
great
thought it
too.
was.
Let's wrap it full circle real quick. Any chance that the Bible was actually written by the people the Bible says it was, and the 12 apostles, and Jesus is real, and all that? And yes, no, any takers?
I don't think so.
For me, it's 100% no.
Nope.
Me too. Nope. Yeah, Derek.
I've seen too much. I know what's behind the curtain.
I mean, that's the other alternative to what Mark was suggesting and the rest of us talked about. So let's just round out our show with that. Derek, unless you have any objections, is the
I think, dude, it's like for me, I lean there could have been a guy, but sometimes I lean that this is all too obviously coincidentally mythic in the patterns we see in the Old Testament. And bro, honestly, I don't know, but I do have a hunch. Whoever crafted this story about Jesus, if there was a dude, he was insignificant to the fact of what they made the narrative of him. And I don't think we're ever going to know there was a dude. So
No, it's
you see
what
what I'm saying?
To me,
And at
it's
the
what
very least,
Dr.
one of the things that you've done with what I saw in Myth Vision, at least, unless you disagree with the shows you've produced, Moses in no way, shape, or form possibly existed.
You can't prove a negative like this, but dude, there's some really good reasons to think the character Moses was invented. And does that mean that this isn't based off of Hyksos expulsion? Is there not a cultural memory of something that is back there that they used and crafted the myth out of? I think there is. But
Yeah.
like the guy, Moses? Come on, man. You ever heard of Sargon of Akkad? Anyway, we're getting into a whole nother.
It's like Dr. Bob said, Dr. Bob Price.
Yep.
We can show that, Superman isn't real. Okay. This guy, Jesus, who did all this. So does that mean Clark Kent isn't real?
Right.
Exactly. See, I make a distinction between a historical figure and the literary Jesus.
Exactly.
There's
Legend
no
versus
such
real.
thing as the literary Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no need for a legend to be able to believe in a historical Jesus. I agree totally.
Yeah.
And it sounds. Are we all on the same page on that? Or
I think so.
Yep.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. So I mean, okay. So we have a really good possible reason why the Bible developed, all based on mythicism, astrology, whatever the reasons are. But I just wanted to round out the show because that's what we were talking about tonight. So I just kind of wanted to bring it full circle. So other than that, lots of great conversation tonight. It was super fun. Thank you guys so much for your time. Derek, thank you, dude.
Thank you.
Creator of Myth Vision. Love your stuff. I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing. Mark, thank you for deconverting Derek, because without you,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have,
We wouldn't have Myth Vision, right?
right, we wouldn't have Myth Vision. So thank you, Father. We appreciate you very much. And so you all have a great rest of the night. Love everybody for joining us. Please subscribe. Let everybody know. Share this particular show because it is awesome. See you all on the flip side. And remember, we don't flock around.